and welcome to today's episode of Archibiz Unpacks Marketing. I'm joined by Anthony Richardson of the Design Emotive. Welcome, Anthony.
Good to be here. Excited.
Awesome. Perhaps we might get started by you giving us a bit of background to the Design Emotive. How did you get started on this journey?
That is a question that I had to actually go through the history books to find out, because I wasn't quite sure when it all started to happen. But basically my education is in architecture. So I've gone through the whole system. I've got my master's degree in architecture. I did a bachelor's at Deakin University. But prior to that, I did an advanced diploma of building design at a TAFE. And what they teach you in TAFE is completely different to architecture. I think I could probably count on one hand the amount of times I was exposed to architecture in TAFE. So when I made the transition from TAFE to architecture school, it like completely just opened up my mind of what's out there. And, you know, the first year of uni, I was just trying to find my feet and sort of get to understand architecture, get on ArchDaily quite a bit, Design, all the very typical architecture student websites. And then the next year, I became like the SONA representative for the university. I started my own little architecture student blog. And then it was during sort of that year where I started to attend a few also guest lectures, and it really opened up my eyes to what's out there. And I just felt this weird compulsion in a way that I just wanted to share it. And it didn't feel right to share it on my architecture student blog. So the next year in 2015, I started up a whole new Instagram account that's completely separate. It started out as Architecture Victoria, as I just wanted to share architecture in Victoria. And basically from that day, I just started to just post projects from all like local Melbourne-based architects. And just over time, it grew from there, and it still remained this sort of, you know, side hobby effectively. Like I was still very much in the mindset that I want to be an architect. And then, you know, chatting with Nick Grenlease and Ben Morgan from Bowerbird, they really opened up my eyes to, you know, what you're doing is media, it's publication. And even though at that time I was still like, oh yeah, I'm just doing this for fun. Eventually it's transitioned over to, I now want to do this. I want to do architecture media as sort of my job, as my career. And then basically from 2019, it's sort of been now my full-time pursuit, basically. So it's been about, 6 years or so in the making.
Yeah, exciting. And have you always had a passion for architecture?
I wouldn't say a passion. My dad was a bricklayer, so there was quite a bit of exposure to, I guess, building sites. And, you know, I always like played around with those little like cheesy 3D software you would buy at Officeworks, where you could design your own garden and design your own house and stuff like that. But I wouldn't say there was like a yearning passion for architecture. I think how I came to that decision was probably more of a pragmatic sense. I like design. My dad's a bricklayer. You know, it has this, and this to it. So, you know, when I started to plug those into potential professions, I sort of landed on either landscape architect or architect. And so it was very more of a pragmatic approach.
Yeah, sure. And so who's looking at the Design Emotive? Who's your core audience?
So it depends which platform you ask. It's really quite interesting. Out of, you know, let's say YouTube and Instagram being the main platforms, which they are, Instagram is very much industry people predominantly. So architects, engineers, interior designers, students, graduates, all of those that work in the built environment industry. I think they hold like a 60% majority based on a few Instagram story polls I've ran in the past. And then it's sort of split between those that are looking to build their own home, those that just like design and house and homes and sort of architecture in general. But over on YouTube, it's completely flipped. And I ran a poll, I think maybe a month and a half ago, and it was, I think 66% were just people that loved design. They just love houses. They just sort of love, I guess, having a sticky beak at other people's homes. And sort of, industry people, students, building your own home, they were sort of just split evenly, I think like at 10% each. So it's sort of, I guess it depends on which platform you sit at, but generally it's sort of, a lot of it is, people that just love houses. They love homes and design and architecture.
Yeah, terrific. And obviously video is your main medium. Why should architects be using video? What's the advantage?
I think the real advantage to video is being able to utilize so much more than just visual. For me, I incorporate a lot of interviews and I guess you could call it voiceover or narration from the architects. And when you're able to listen to the architect talk about the design and talk about the challenges and the space and the materials, while you're also being presented with supporting imagery, that becomes a really good tool and a really good medium to better understand the space. And for the most part, buildings are quite still. You don't generally want your house to move effectively, but what you might have is operable shutters, you might have disappearing sliding doors, you might have a hydraulic deck that folds down from the wall or whatever it may be. And while you can take multiple photos and sort of stitch that together for a little GIF or a GIF or however you pronounce that, the video sort of is a way to animate the house, and going beyond just what's movable in the house, you can also animate it with people. So, you can have this really strong connection to the people in the house. You can see how the house is habited, and then there's also that opportunity where you can have a real good personal connection with say the architect. If you go to a website article, you'll see photos of the houses, you'll see a beautiful written article, but you don't really know who's behind that house unless you follow the architect quite deeply and you know who the directors are. But for the most part, it's quite faceless. It's quite here's the building, here's the home, here's the design, look at this. But, or at least the way that I do my videos is all of a sudden you are presented with a person, with a face, and humans, we just have that natural connection to one another, not necessarily to bricks and mortar, but to skin and bones, basically.
Yeah, I think absolutely. They say people bite people. It's all about that personal relationship. But, getting architects to talk and getting them on camera, my experience is they're not necessarily the types of people that put themselves out there and can find it hard to talk about themselves. How do you help them be comfortable and confident to talk on camera? And do you have any tips for architects that are going to embark on that process?
Yeah. So first of all, I sympathize with the architects. I've had a couple goes at, being in front of camera on the Design Emotive, and luckily I am the one editing it. So I can groan and roll my eyes at all my terrible takes and be like, oh gosh. But, I guess to be in front of camera, it's a very daunting experience if you haven't done it. if you're an architect that has done a few, say, lectures, or maybe you teach at university, you might have a better, you might be better at feeling more comfortable in such a delivery based position. But when I get an architect and I sort of sit them down, there's sort of a couple tips I give them on the day. It's one is don't stare directly into the camera lens, because that can get a bit, that's a way for you to just not switch off, but you might forget what's happening, like, because you see that and you're in deer in headlights basically. So I tend to sort of stand just behind the camera, probably a tiny bit off to the side, and I just tell the architect, just talk to me behind the camera, just talk to me like you're talking to anyone else. And while I do send the questions I tend to ask in advance, I do also encourage the architect not to prepare too much, because if you prepare too much, you get into a habit that you will, if you slip on a word or you forget to say a word, you're just thrown completely off guard. So remind the architect that you've spent 1 to 3 years with this project. Nobody knows it better than you. Just tell me about it, talk me through it, talk me through the materials. Don't think too much, and more importantly, like, it is going to be edited. We're not just going to upload it as it is. I'm going to cut out the slip ups, and we're going to cut out any long drawn pauses or staring blankly off into the distance. Like, we're going to fix all that up. And more importantly, and this is the thing that probably relieves them the most, is they're not going to be on camera for the entire video. Like, they might be on for, I don't know, 30 seconds total, basically. So for most of it, they're just sort of given a voiceover. So while I do try to frame up a nice shot and everything for the architect, the reality is they're not really going to be on the video. It's mainly just capturing their perspectives and their story.
Yeah, great. I think there's a lot of comfort that comes from that luxury of knowing you've got the edit suite as well, that it is, you are going to be, have the Instagram effect, and there is going to be a level of filtering on, how you portrayed as well, which brings some comfort.
I really need to put out a blooper reel or something, because there's been a few doozies, but yeah, I'll have to talk to the architects about that.
Hilarious. One of our clients, Winter Architecture, has had 2 of the 5 top most viewed videos on your channel in 2020. What do you think it is about those top 5 videos that meant they were the most viewed on your site?
Yeah, it's really hard to sort of break down like what it is exactly that made these videos more popular than the 15 other videos I did. The winter architecture videos in particular, they sort of boast a more, minimalist aesthetic, a minimalist approach. And that topic of minimalism is quite, I don't really want to use the word popular, but a lot of people are interested in sort of that aesthetic, that type of lifestyle. And so I think people are drawn to that for either the good or bad. If you read the comment sections, they do get a bit interesting. But it's one of those things where, the other videos in that top 5 is, Jack Chen's Type Street apartment. So again, that's like, I wouldn't really call it, it's small living, it's something that's unconventional. I believe the other one was Chris McGowan's own apartment, which was in a mixed-use development. And the other one was Jerry Woolridge's off-grid home. So all of those homes are quite representative of the unconventional. It's not the 3-bedroom home in the suburbs. There's something quite unique about each one of those, whether it's a minimalist approach, off-grid, small living, apartment living with twins and your own mixed use development. So I think it's just sort of having, and I guess that comes with architecture. It's not what people are used to seeing, and so that's what really captures the eyes in the audience, is these very unique, incredible homes.
Yeah, so the opportunity to see what we don't normally get to see.
Exactly.
Yeah, terrific. Now, architects have traditionally invested heavily in photography. We've seen some pretty crazy budgets fly around about what they spend on photography. Are we starting to see a shift towards people investing more greatly in video?
I think from when I first started videos at the start of 2019 versus now, there are more architects wanting video content, whether they want to license the full video I produce, or whether they want to get a 1-minute video to submit to an award program, or maybe they want a video to submit to open house, or maybe even just to have as their own record of a project. That has increased from 2019, but I would still communicate to architects, which is definitely going against what my business model is, but still invest heavily into photographs. And the reason for that is, if you don't have a video, there might only be a handful of publications in the world that won't publish a project without a video. But if you don't have photographs, you're not going to get published anywhere, basically, without photos. So photographs still remain the king in the current architecture media landscape. There may be a shift over the next 5 or 7 years or so, where more and more publications are going to favor video. There might be more video-only publications. There might be, but at the moment, our media landscape's very much rooted in photographs and written articles, whether that's in a magazine or a website or even on Instagram or whatever it may be. So I do encourage architects to try and find the budgets for video production. Video production, if you go to a video production studio, might not be cheap. You might be paying the same amount as you do for photography, or even more, depending on what you want. And the challenge with architects is, when it comes to video, they don't really know what they want in terms of, what kind of video do you want. So there's a really challenging aspect for architects, especially when it comes to money, and especially smaller practices that don't have huge project budgets. So if a publication such as the Design Emotive or Never Too Small, or someone reaches out and goes, "Hey, could we film your house as part of our publication?" Jump at it, and then speak to one about licensing or getting some extra content. But still put your money on photographs for now, but hopefully in the next 5+ years we'll start to see a shift in the media landscape.
Yeah, let's hope so. I think there's a lot of opportunity that video offers around communicating a story that photos and words, they just quite don't do the same, particularly when it comes to conveying philosophy and what the practice stands for and who's involved. So I think there's a lot of opportunity there for video. Now, you did touch on Instagram. You have a massive Instagram following, over 100,000 followers when I last checked. Top tips for practices to grow their own Instagram following. What do you suggest?
I mean, there's always the very typical of, posting at the right time. So look at your audience, see what times of the day and what days they're most active. There's posting consistently, there's posting high quality imagery, which architects always have at their disposal. But what I think is more important is not to worry about the quantity of followers, but probably more so the quality of followers. Of course, I can't speak to any practices, intentions of Instagram. You might be using it just to grow brand awareness, or maybe you're looking to land clients, or you're just using it to just share a bit of site photos, whatever it may be. But ultimately, if it's part of your marketing strategy, you want it to land you clients effectively. And I think it's really important to basically break it all down. And if you go back to the true meaning of Instagram being a social media platform, it's in that first word, be social. Like if you're social, if you leave comments, reply to comments, you're more personable on your account. If you, more importantly, put faces to the account and start to build a connection with who is following you, not worrying about who isn't following you, you can really start to build up relationships with an audience that if you sort of look at a architecture client relationship, they're very tight knit for 2-3+ years, allowing them to get to know you through a phone, and then all of a sudden meet you in person, and then agree for you to design their home and follow them through construction. Like, being able to communicate who you are through social media I find is more valuable than having 100,000 followers, basically.
Yeah, that's excellent advice. Be social on social. That's what it is. So, I think we often, focus on the imagery and the visual aspect, but getting down into the comments, that's really useful. And that's how you build the connection. So that's excellent advice. 2020, we all got through it. We're all here sitting on the other side, for better or for worse. What, from your experience, what have you seen has been the impact of the pandemic on architecture, specifically on marketing for architects?
So I'm not heavily involved in the sort of conversations architects have with their own personal marketing. I guess I exist as someone that architects come to after they've sort of figured out, oh, we want to do more videos, or we want to get published more. But with the conversations I have had with some architects, is they've had a lot of inquiries from people that have all of a sudden realized, after spending 23 hours a day locked inside their homes, that their homes could be so much better, whether it's a lack of natural light, or worse, lack of natural ventilation. Maybe the spaces are cramped, or maybe the layout's wrong, or there's not enough PowerPoints for all the equipment you needed to work from home, or whatever it may be. So I think, with architects, I guess they need to shift the conversation to, how can we make your lives better, versus look at this shiny new thing we built during the pandemic. It's more like, I guess it comes back to that last point of, being social and making a social connection. It's more so, I find, is architects are in the business, at least, I guess every architect, they're in the business of making other people's lives better through design. So I guess that's where the communication needs to sort of shift to. How can we serve you? But in terms of where I think what the pandemic has highlighted to those, to non-industry people, is the space that you inhabit, especially on a very long-term basis, is important. And so you need to look at ways to make it better, whether it is a simple coat of paint, or maybe it's a bit further and knocking down that back lean to, and building something sort of new. I think that's what the pandemic has really highlighted. Well, what 2020 highlighted was our housing for the most part, is pretty substandard. So, if we get a professional, we can actually enjoy being home versus a sense of being locked up effectively.
Yeah, absolutely. I have to ask as well. So you mentioned at the start of the interview that you started off as Architecture Victoria. Obviously, we're pretty restricted with how far we can travel, but are there plans to go beyond Victoria in the future with the Design Emotive?
Yes, I had plans. I was thinking of plans in February 2020 of going up to Sydney. Sent a few emails out. Then about a month later, had to send a bunch of emails back to these architects going, we need to reschedule. But the goal, the reason why I rebranded from Architecture Victoria to the Design Emotive was wanting to go past Victoria's border. And so there are plans to go to each capital city and spend a week or two there and film as much as I can. Logistically, that's quite challenging in many sense. So there needs to be quite a bit of planning. And, from a business operator, as a sole business practitioner, owner, whatever you want to call myself, I also need to factor in costs. At the moment, it's not a very profitable business model or business I have at the moment. So, I need to figure out, how to get there, how many can I film in a week, who's willing to do it. But if there are architects interstate that are interested, like give me a buzz, and I can put you on a spreadsheet so I know who to reach out to. But there are plans to go interstate, and hopefully in a few more years, once international borders open, like even go overseas even.
And where's the first place you'd go overseas to film?
Japan, 100%.
Yeah, love it. Some amazing stuff going on in Japan. So you have touched on their architects calling out to you if they do have a project. What's the process? What do they need to do particularly if they're in Victoria and they have a project that they'd love to get you involved on?
So I do have like a page on the website where you can fill out this arduous contact form that states a bunch of stuff like, where is the project, when can we film, what is it, send me the media kit, blah blah blah. But I try not to be so formal in my process, because sometimes I will reach out to an architect on Instagram DMs, or I might send a cold email or whatever it may be. But if you are an architect and you do have a project that we could film, then definitely just either hit me up on Instagram or send me an email, which is on the website. And then, then we can sort of start discussing. I am only focusing on residential projects at the moment. So we'll hold off on that cafe or that new office design at the moment. But, I'm always open to a wide range of residential projects. There is some criteria to make sure it fits within sort of my own, what would you call it, feeling of what I constitute as good architecture. But generally, I'm probably going to say yes to your project anyway.
Well, there we go. There's a big call out to anyone that wants to get their project profiled on the Design Emotive. Anthony, thank you for taking the time to share your insights around video and architecture today.